Imagine standing in a kitchen in New Jersey or South Philly, surrounded by the smell of slow-simmering tomato sauce, looking at old black and white photos of your great-grandparents who stepped off a boat from Palermo in 1910. You have spent your entire life identifying as Sicilian. You have the flag, you know the dialect words for food, and you have always believed your blood was a direct, unfiltered connection to that sun-drenched island in the Mediterranean. But what if I told you that a groundbreaking genetic study just pulled the rug out from under everything you thought you knew? When scientists recently compared the DNA of second- and third-generation Italian Americans who claim Sicilian heritage with the DNA of people currently living in modern Sicily, they didn't just find a few differences. They found that almost nothing matched. It turns out that being Italian American isn't just a cultural divergence, it is a biological mystery that has been hiding in plain sight for over a century. Today we are diving deep into the genetic lab to figure out how millions of people lost their DNA connection to the motherland and what it really means to be Sicilian in the 21st century. To understand this genetic bombshell, we first have to look at what scientists call the founder effect and the Great Arrival. Between 1880 and 1924, more than 4 million Italians immigrated to the United States, and a massive percentage of them came from Sicily. This was a specific group of people from a specific time in history. They weren't a random sample of the Sicilian population. They were often people from specific interior villages or impoverished coastal towns who were fleeing economic hardship or volcanic activity. When they arrived in America, they didn't just blend into a general European pot. They settled in tight-knit enclaves, little Italies, where people from the same Sicilian villages lived on the same streets. This created a genetic time capsule. While the Italian Americans were preserving their 1910-era genetics in places like New York, Chicago, and New Orleans, the island of Sicily itself was undergoing a massive biological transformation. Sicily has always been the most conquered island in history. Over thousands of years, it has been ruled by Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Normans, Spanish, and French. Every one of these groups left a mark on the DNA, but the study found that the genetic shifting didn't stop in 1900. In the last 100 years, modern Sicily has seen a massive influx of genetic material from northern Italy, the wider Mediterranean basin, and North Africa that simply wasn't as prevalent in the gene pool of the people who left over a century ago. The researchers used high-resolution autosomal DNA testing to compare these two groups. Autosomal DNA is the stuff you inherit from both parents, and it's great for looking at the last few hundred years of ancestry. When they ran the samples, they expected to see a close overlap. Instead, they saw two distinct clusters. The Italian-American DNA looked like a fossilized version of Sicily from the late 19th century. It was heavy on specific Levantine and ancient Greek markers that were concentrated in the rural hills of Sicily back then. In contrast, the modern Sicilian DNA showed a much more Europeanized profile. The match was so low that if you put their DNA samples side by side without labels, a computer might guess they were from entirely different regions of the Mediterranean. This raises a fascinating question. If you are an Italian American, who are you actually related to? The study suggests that many Italian Americans are genetically closer to the people who lived in Sicily in the year 1850 than they are to the people living there in 2024. It's a concept that scientists call genetic drift. When a small group of people leaves a larger population and settles elsewhere, they start their own evolutionary path. In the United States, even within the Italian-American community, there was a lot of mixing between Sicilians, Neapolitans, and Calabrians. Back in Italy, these groups rarely interacted due to the rugged geography and local prejudices. But in the crowded tenements of Manhattan, a Sicilian boy might marry a girl from Salerno. This created a Southern Italian hybrid DNA that never actually existed in Italy itself. But there is an even deeper layer to this mystery. It's called the Arab-Berber signature. One of the most unique parts of Sicilian history is the Emirate of Sicily, a period where the island was under Islamic rule. This left a significant North African genetic footprint. The study found that Italian Americans who left in the early 1900s often carried very high concentrations of these markers because they came from isolated western Sicilian towns where that ancestry had been concentrated for centuries. However, in modern Sicily, due to internal migration within Italy and the Italianization of the population following World War II, those specific signatures have been diluted or shifted. When an Italian American takes a DNA test and sees Middle Eastern or North African percentages, they are seeing that 1900-era Sicilian reality. But a modern Sicilian might take the same test and see a much higher Italian or Greek percentage because their family history includes more recent movement from the Italian mainland. The reaction to this study has been polarizing. For many Italian Americans, their identity is built on a sense of unbroken lineage. They see themselves as the true keepers of the old ways, and in many ways they are. They talk about gravy instead of sauce, and they use dialect words that have actually disappeared from common speech in modern-day Palermo. The DNA study proves that this isn't just a cultural quirk, it's a biological reality. They are carrying a genetic snapshot of an island that no longer exists in that exact form. They are the survivors of a specific historical moment, frozen in time by the Atlantic Ocean. On the other side of the pond, modern Sicilians find this comparison just as strange. To them, Italian Americans are Americans. They don't see the resemblance, and now, biology is backing them up. The movement of people within the European Union, the impact of 2 world wars, and the industrialization of southern Italy have mixed the gene pool of the island more in the last 80 years than in the previous 300. Modern Sicilians are the product of a unified Italy, whereas the ancestors of Italian Americans left before the Italian identity had really even settled in the hearts of the rural poor. So, if nothing matched, what does that mean for the average person who grew up proud of their Sicilian blood? It doesn't mean you aren't Sicilian. It means that Sicilian is a moving target. It means that ancestry is not a static list of ingredients. It is a river that is constantly flowing. The study highlighted that the Italian-American cluster is now its own unique genetic group. In the world of population genetics, being Italian-American is now considered as distinct a category as being Ashkenazi Jewish or Cajun. It is a group that was forged in the fire of the American experience, taking the raw materials of 1900-era Sicily and blending them into something entirely new. This brings us to the genetic bottleneck. When those 4 million people left Italy, they took a lot of unique genetic variants with them. Some of the variants found in New York and Philadelphia today are extremely rare in modern Italy. This is because the families that stayed behind might have stopped having children, or their towns might have been decimated by the Spanish flu or the wars. Meanwhile, in the suburbs of America, those families exploded in size. A single Sicilian immigrant in 1905 might have 500 living descendants today. This means that American cities are now reservoirs for ancient Sicilian DNA that has been lost in the motherland. The scientists also looked at the Y-DNA and mitochondrial DNA, which track the direct paternal and maternal lines. This is where they found the most surprising mismatches. In early 20th century Sicily, there were very high percentages of certain haplogroups associated with the Phoenicians and the Carthaginians, the ancient seafaring powers of the Mediterranean. In the Italian-American samples, these haplogroups are still quite common, but in modern Sicilian samples, they have been largely replaced by haplogroups associated with Central and Northern European migrations. It's as if the ancient Mediterranean heart of the island migrated to America, while the island itself became more European. For anyone who loves genealogy, this is a major warning. If you take a DNA test and look at your matches in Europe, don't be surprised if you don't find many close cousins. You might find 5th or 6th cousins, but the matching logic breaks down because your DNA has been on a separate path for 5 generations. You are looking for a version of Italy that has evolved, moved, and changed. It's like trying to match a photograph of a person at age 5 with a photograph of them at age 80. The DNA is there, but the expression of it is entirely different. The study also touched on the urban-rural divide. The people who left Sicily were overwhelmingly from rural, agricultural backgrounds. The people who stayed and thrived in modern Sicily often moved to the cities or were part of a more mobile social class. This created a class-based genetic split. The Italian-American population is essentially a massive expansion of the 1900-era Sicilian rural working class. Their DNA reflects the isolation of the mountain villages and the specific history of the Latifondia estates. Modern Sicily, meanwhile, reflects the cosmopolitan, interconnected world of the modern European Union. But let's get into the most entertaining part of this, the actual DNA test results. Many Italian Americans who participated in the study were shocked to find that their Italian percentage was lower than they expected. Some saw Cypriot, Levantine, or Anatolian segments. In the past, people might have thought this was an error in the test, But the scientists explained that this is actually the purest version of the old Sicilian DNA. Sicily was the crossroads of the East. Before it was Italian, it was a hub of the Byzantine and Arab worlds. The people who left in 1910 carried that East meets West signature in its highest density. Modern Sicilians, through their connection to the Italian mainland, have seen those Eastern markers replaced by mainland European markers. So, ironically, the person in Brooklyn with 20% Levantine DNA might be more Sicilian in a historical sense than someone living in Messina today. This research also blows a hole in the pure blood myths that some people hold on to. There is no such thing as a pure Sicilian. To be Sicilian is to be a mosaic. The study shows that the mosaic looks different depending on where the pieces are kept. If you keep the pieces in a box in America, they look like the 1900 version. If you leave them on the floor in Europe, people keep walking over them, moving them around and adding new pieces. The mismatch isn't a failure of ancestry, it's a success of adaptation. Think about the food as a metaphor for the DNA. In America, we created spaghetti and meatballs and chicken parm. These aren't really things you find in Sicily. They are American inventions using Italian ideas. The DNA is exactly the same. Italian-American genetics are a New World invention using Old World ingredients. The reason almost nothing matched is that the recipe has been changed by the environment. In America, the ingredients mixed in ways they never could back home. The Sicilian DNA in America had to survive different diseases, different diets, and different social structures. The question of Italianity is also at the heart of this. When the immigrants left, Italy was a very new concept. Most of them didn't speak Italian. They spoke their local dialects. They didn't consider themselves Italian. They were Palermitani, or Girgenti. Their DNA was as localized as their speech. In the 100 years they have been away, Italy has become a monoculture. Television, standardized education, and internal migration have smoothed out the edges. The modern Sicilian DNA is smoother, more national, and more standardized. The Italian-American DNA is lumpy, local, and antique. They are two different versions of the same story. For those listening who have done their own DNA kits, you probably noticed those genetic communities features. Companies like Ancestry DNA found this same mismatch. They had to create a specific category for Southern Italians in New Jersey and Eastern Pennsylvania because those people matched each other perfectly, but they didn't match the people in the Sicily category. It's a biological neighborhood. You aren't just related to a place, you are related to a movement. You are part of a nomadic tribe that stopped moving 100 years ago and started building. The implications for health and medicine are also significant. Because Italian Americans are a founder population, they have certain genetic predispositions that might be different from modern Sicilians. Studying the mismatch can help doctors understand why certain conditions might be more common in the American branch of the family than the Italian one. It turns out that those few generations of isolation and mixing in the US have created a unique medical profile. It is the Italian-American genome, and it is only now being fully mapped and understood. So where do we go from here? The researchers suggest that we need to stop thinking about DNA as a static badge of where you are from. Instead, we should think of it as a diary of where your ancestors have been. The mismatch between Italian Americans and modern Sicilians isn't a sign that someone is fake. It is a testament to the incredible power of migration to reshape the human species in a very short amount of time. In just 4 or 5 generations, the Atlantic Ocean has created a genetic distance that usually takes thousands of years to develop. If you are an Italian American, you are a living time capsule. You are carrying the genetic legacy of a lost world. You are the descendant of the people who were brave enough, or desperate enough, to leave a beautiful island for a cold, crowded city far away. Your DNA is the director's cut of Sicilian history, unfiltered, intense, and full of the Eastern complexity that defined the island's golden age. Modern Sicilians are the revised edition, more streamlined, better integrated with Europe, and ready for the future. The mismatch is beautiful. It tells us that identity is not just about what we are born with, but what we do with it. It tells us that the little Italis were not just cultural enclaves, they were biological laboratories. They created a new segment of humanity. So the next time someone tells you that you aren't really Italian because you don't speak the language or you haven't been to the island, you can tell them that according to science you are something even more interesting. You are a unique genetic pioneer. You are a member of a founder population that preserved the ancient secrets of the Mediterranean in the suburbs of America. Scientists used to think that DNA was a way to confirm our stories. But as this study shows, sometimes DNA tells a better story than we ever could have imagined. It tells a story of survival, of mixing, and of the profound changes that occur when humans cross an ocean. The Nothing Matched headline isn't a headline about a loss of connection. It's a headline about the birth of a new lineage. The Italian-American DNA is a masterpiece of history, geography, and resilience. Keep exploring your roots, but don't be surprised if the roots lead you somewhere you didn't expect. Whether you are 100% Sicilian or a mixture of the whole Mediterranean, your DNA is a map of 1,000 journeys. And the mismatch is just proof that your ancestors were busy living life, making moves, and creating something new every step of the way. Stay curious about your genes, because every time we look into the microscope, we find another reason to be amazed at how we got here. The story of the Sicilian American DNA is one of the greatest successful failures in genetic history. A failure to stay the same, and a success in becoming something legendary. While the data might say the DNA doesn't match in a literal sense, the spirit of the connection remains. The memory of the island, the traditions of the village, and the genetic markers of the Phoenicians and Arabs are still pulsing through the veins of millions of people across North America. It's a different kind of match, a match across time rather than space. And for many of us, that is the most meaningful match of all. We are the architects of our own heritage, and science is finally giving us the tools to see the incredibly complex, mismatched, and wonderful reality of who we truly are.